Somebody tell me why this cockroach is wearing silk at my wedding.
The bride said that, at her own reception, in front of 300 guests holding champagne glasses. A black woman had just walked in, midnight blue gown, invitation in hand. Carolyn Ashford marched up to her and tugged her sleeve hard enough to pop the seam.
Silk doesn't fix what God got wrong with your skin. Get out.
The black woman looked down at her torn sleeve. Then she looked Carolyn dead in the eye.
You sure you want to do this?
Carolyn laughed.
What are you gonna do? Call someone?
I won't need to.
The room went quiet. 300 people pretended they saw nothing. But here's the thing. The woman she just humiliated? She was the only reason the groom still had a company. And Carolyn had no clue. But before we get to that moment, let me take you back. Back to that same morning. Before the champagne. Before the torn dress. Before everything fell apart. 6 hours earlier, Baltimore. Danielle Harrison stood barefoot in her penthouse kitchen. Sunlight poured through floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the inner harbor. The smell of fresh Italian espresso filled the room. No sugar, no cream, just black, the way she'd been drinking it since law school. She looked like a woman getting ready for a Saturday brunch. T-shirt, reading glasses, hair wrapped in a silk scarf. Nothing about her screamed money. But the penthouse told a different story. Clean lines, marble countertops, a single painting on the wall worth more than most people's houses. Understated, intentional. Every detail chosen by a woman who didn't need to prove anything to anyone. Danielle Harrison was the founder and CEO of Pinnacle Equity Partners, a private equity firm managing over $4 billion in assets. Self-made, raised by a single mother who cleaned office buildings in West Baltimore. No inheritance, no family connections, just a brain that could read a balance sheet the way some people read poetry. And this morning, she was reading one. On her tablet sat the details of the biggest deal of her career. A $1.2 billion investment into Trident Infrastructure Group, a mid-size construction and development company run by a man named Elliot Ashford. The deal was set to close Monday morning. One signature, one wire transfer, done. But today was Saturday, and today, Elliot Ashford was getting married. He had invited Danielle as a gesture of good faith, a personal touch before the ink dried. The thing was, they had never met face to face. Every negotiation went through intermediaries. Every call was handled by Danielle's general counsel, Rochelle Grant. On the few video conferences Elliot attended, Danielle kept her camera off. That was how she liked it. She didn't want her face walking into rooms before she did. She didn't want people adjusting their behavior because they Googled her net worth. She wanted to see people as they really were. Her phone buzzed. Rochelle's name flashed on the screen. "You're really going to this thing?" Rochelle's voice was half amused, half concerned. "It's a wedding, Rochelle, not a battlefield." You sure about that?" "I did some digging on the bride. Old Virginia money. The kind of family that still calls the maid the girl. Her mother once got a caterer fired for making eye contact with her during a fundraiser." Danielle took a sip of her espresso. "I've sat across from men who tried to buy my company out from under me while shaking my hand. I think I can handle a bride." Rochelle paused. "Just don't go alone. I'm coming with you." I was counting on it. By noon, Danielle had traded the t-shirt for a custom midnight blue silk gown. No logos, no labels showing. Just clean, beautiful fabric that moved like water when she walked. She clipped on a pair of small diamond earrings, her mother's, and looked at herself in the mirror. She looked like exactly what she was, a woman who belonged in any room she chose to enter. Victor Coleman, her driver and personal security, was already waiting downstairs. Ex-Marine, early 50s, built like a wall but moved like a shadow. He had been with Danielle for 8 years. He opened the door to a modest black SUV, not a limousine. Danielle didn't do limousines. "Ashford Hall?" Victor asked. Ashford Hall. The drive from Baltimore to Loudoun County, Virginia took just under 2 hours. rolling green hills, white fences, horse country, the kind of landscape that looked like money had been poured into the soil itself. Ashford Hall sat at the end of a long gravel driveway lined with oak trees, white columns, manicured lawns, a string quartet playing under a tent draped in white silk, ice sculptures catching the afternoon sun, imported flowers, peonies, gardenias, roses, filling the air with a scent so thick you could taste it. 300 guests milled around in linen and silk. Senators, old money families, corporate executives. The men wore watches that cost more than cars. The women wore smiles that cost even more. Danielle stepped out of the SUV and looked around. She and Rochelle were two of maybe 5 black faces in the entire crowd. Rochelle adjusted her jacket and raised an eyebrow. "You sure this isn't a battlefield?" Danielle smiled. "Ask me again in an hour." They hadn't even made it through the front gate before it started. A young woman in a headset, the venue coordinator, stepped in front of them with a clipboard and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She looked Danielle up and down, then Rochelle, then back at Danielle. "Are you with the catering team? The service entrance is around the back." Rochelle tilted her head. "Excuse me?" "The catering company. You're with them, right? They're setting up through the—" Danielle held up her invitation. Cream-colored cardstock, gold lettering. The coordinator's smile cracked just a little. She glanced at the invitation like it was written in a language she didn't speak. "Oh, I'm sorry, of course. Right this way." She stepped aside. No eye contact, no apology that meant anything. Rochelle leaned into Danielle's ear as they walked past. "Battlefield, told you." Danielle said nothing. She just kept walking. Inside, the ceremony was already underway. Rows of white chairs stretched across a manicured lawn facing a flower-draped arch. A pastor was reading vows. Carolyn Ashford stood at the altar in a gown that probably cost more than a semester at Harvard. Her smile was wide, bright, and practiced. The kind of smile that belonged on a magazine cover, not a marriage. Elliot Ashford stood beside her. Tall, clean-cut, nervous in the way that grooms always are, fidgeting with his cufflinks, blinking too much. He looked like a man who had rehearsed this moment 100 times and still didn't feel ready. Danielle watched from the back row. She studied Elliot's face. This was the man she was about to trust with $1.2 billion. She wanted to see how he moved, how he spoke, whether his eyes wandered or stayed locked on the woman in front of him. First impressions mattered to Danielle. Not the kind people put on in boardrooms, the kind they wore when they thought nobody important was watching. The ceremony ended. Applause, kisses, rose petals thrown into the air. The crowd began to drift toward the grand ballroom for the reception. Waiters appeared with silver trays of champagne. A jazz band started playing something smooth and expensive. Danielle took a glass. She moved through the crowd the way she always did, quietly. She introduced herself as Danielle to anyone who asked. No last name, no title, just Danielle. Most people were polite, the surface kind of polite. Smiles that lasted exactly as long as the handshake. One woman, blonde, pearl necklace, probably a senator's wife, tilted her head and said, "And how do you know the Ashfords?" "Through business," Danielle said. "Oh, how nice." The woman's eyes drifted past Danielle's shoulder before she even finished the sentence, already looking for someone more interesting, someone more expected. Danielle didn't flinch. She had been invisible in rooms full of powerful people before. It wasn't new. It never stopped stinging, but it wasn't new. Carolyn had changed into a second gown for the reception. Shorter, tighter, more dramatic. She swept into the ballroom like she owned the air inside it. Her eyes moved across the room with the precision of a security camera, scanning, cataloging, judging. And then her gaze landed on Danielle. It was subtle at first, a narrowing of the eyes, a slight tilt of the chin. The way a person looks at a stain on an expensive tablecloth. Carolyn whispered something to the woman beside her, her mother, Catherine Ashford Moore. Catherine's eyes followed Carolyn's gaze to Danielle, her lips pressed into a thin line. She nodded once. Carolyn put down her champagne glass. She picked up a fresh one, and she walked. The crowd seemed to part for her, not because they were afraid, but because that's what crowds do for brides. They make way. Danielle saw her coming. She didn't move. She didn't look away. Carolyn stopped 2 feet in front of her, close enough that Danielle could smell her perfume, something heavy, floral, expensive. Close enough that every guest within 20 feet could hear what came next. "I don't remember putting you on the guest list." Danielle kept her voice calm. "Your husband invited me." "My husband doesn't know you." "He does, actually." Carolyn's jaw tightened. She looked Danielle up and down, slowly, deliberately, the way you'd inspect something you found on the bottom of your shoe. "That dress. Is that Valentino?" Danielle didn't answer. "It is, isn't it?" Carolyn's voice dropped, not quieter, sharper. "There's no way you bought that. Who'd you borrow it from? Or did it just fall off a truck somewhere between here and whatever Section 8 building you crawled out of?" A few guests turned their heads. Someone coughed. Nobody spoke. Danielle met her gaze, steady, unblinking. "I'd suggest you stop talking now." "Or what?" "Or you'll regret it." Carolyn laughed, the kind of laugh designed to be heard. She reached out and grabbed the shoulder of Danielle's gown. Her fingers twisted into the silk. She pulled. The seam didn't just tear, it gave way with a sharp, clean rip that cut through the ambient music like a slap. The jazz band stuttered. Conversations died mid-sentence. 300 heads turned toward the sound. Carolyn held the torn fabric in her fist. Her face was flushed. Her eyes were wild. And she said it loud enough for the entire room to hear. "Now it matches your class." Silence. The kind of silence that has weight. The kind you can feel pressing against your chest. Danielle stood there, bare shoulder exposed, torn silk hanging, surrounded by 300 people who were suddenly very interested in their champagne glasses. Nobody moved. Nobody said a word. Then, footsteps. Fast ones. Elliot Ashford pushed through the crowd, face pale, eyes wide. He had heard the rip from across the room. He looked at Carolyn. He looked at Danielle. He looked at the torn fabric in his new wife's hand. "Carolyn, what did you do?" "I handled it, Elliot. She doesn't belong here." "She's a guest. She has an invitation." "I don't care who invited her. Look at her. She's not one of us." Elliot turned to Danielle. His face was a mess of embarrassment and apology and cowardice all mixed together. He wanted to fix this. She could see it. But he didn't want to fight his bride on their wedding day. "I'm so sorry," he said. "Maybe it's best if... Maybe you could..." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. The meaning was clear. "Maybe you should leave." Danielle looked at him for a long moment. She didn't blink. She didn't nod. She just looked at him the way you look at someone who is about to learn something very expensive about themselves. Then she bent down. She picked up the piece of torn silk from the marble floor. She folded it, carefully, precisely, like it was something precious, and placed it inside her clutch. Rochelle was already at her side, vibrating with fury. Her fists were clenched. Her jaw was locked. She was ready to burn this entire estate to the ground with words alone. But Danielle touched her arm. Gently, just enough. "Not yet," she whispered. Rochelle exhaled through her teeth. "Danielle." "Not yet." They turned and walked toward the exit, shoulder to shoulder, backs straight, heads high. The crowd parted again, but this time it wasn't out of respect. It was out of shame. Behind them, Carolyn Ashford stood in her reception gown, still holding the torn silk, smiling like she had just won something. She had no idea what she had just lost. They made it halfway across the parking lot before the next wave hit. Danielle's torn sleeve caught the evening breeze. The silk fluttered against her bare shoulder like a broken wing. Gravel crunched under her heels. The sun was dropping behind the oak trees, painting everything in gold and shadow. Rochelle walked beside her, phone already in hand, fingers flying across the screen. "I'm calling the office. I want every document on the Trident deal pulled before we hit the highway." Good. And I'm calling our litigation team. Even better. They were 30 feet from the SUV when a voice cut through the evening air. Stop right there. Catherine Ashford Moore stood on the stone steps of the estate's side entrance. She was flanked by 2 private security guards. Thick necks, earpieces, hands folded in front of them like bouncers at a club nobody asked to join. Catherine's chin was high. Her pearls caught the fading light. Her voice carried the kind of authority that comes from a lifetime of never being questioned. You two aren't going anywhere until we sort this out. Danielle stopped walking. She turned slowly. Sort what out? You weren't invited. You caused a scene, and I have reason to believe you may have taken something from inside the venue. Rochelle stepped forward. Taken something? Are you serious right now? I'm very serious. That dress she's wearing, my daughter says it's stolen. And I don't know what else you might have slipped into those bags of yours. Danielle's clutch was the size of a paperback book. It could hold a phone, a lipstick, and a credit card. Maybe a breath mint if you squeezed. The idea that she had stolen anything was so absurd it almost deserved a laugh. Almost. Catherine pulled out her phone. I'm calling the sheriff. Ma'am, Rochelle said, voice flat and hard as concrete. I am a licensed attorney. My client was invited to this event by the groom himself. She has committed no crime. If you call the police with a false report, you will be the one facing charges. Catherine didn't even look at her. She dialed. She spoke into the phone with the calm precision of someone ordering room service. Yes, hello. I need deputies at Ashford Hall. We have 2 women here who were not invited. They've caused a disturbance and I believe they may have stolen personal property from the venue. Yes. Black women. 2 of them. Thank you. She hung up. She smiled. Victor Coleman stepped out of the SUV. He moved slowly, the way a man moves when he wants you to know he's choosing not to move fast. 6'2", 220, shoulders like a freight truck. He positioned himself between Danielle and the security guards without saying a word. But his phone was in his hand, and the camera was recording. Danielle stood perfectly still. The breeze picked up. Somewhere behind them, the jazz band started playing again. Music and laughter floated out from the ballroom like nothing had happened. 7 minutes later, blue and red lights flickered through the oak trees. 2 sheriff's deputies pulled up the gravel drive. They stepped out of the cruiser. One tall, one stocky, both white, both wearing the expression of men who had already decided what they were looking at. They walked past Catherine without a glance. They walked straight to Danielle. Evening, ma'am. We got a call about a disturbance. Can I see some ID? Danielle reached into her clutch and handed over her driver's license. The deputy studied it like it was a counterfeit bill. And what's your business here tonight? I was invited to the wedding. Invited by who? The groom, Elliot Ashford. Catherine's voice cut in from behind them. That's a lie. She was not invited. She forced her way in and assaulted my daughter. The deputy didn't verify the invitation. Danielle was holding it in plain sight. Cream cardstock, gold letters right there in her hand. He didn't look at it. Ma'am, I'm going to need you and your friend to wait by the vehicle while we figure this out. Rochelle's voice went cold. Figure what out exactly? She has an invitation. She has ID. There's no probable cause for detention. Ma'am, I didn't ask for your legal opinion. You're getting it anyway. I'm her attorney. The deputy turned back to Danielle. I'm going to need to look inside that bag. No, Danielle said. Ma'am, I said no. You have no warrant, no probable cause, and no right to search my personal belongings. The deputy looked at his partner. His partner shrugged. The deputy reached over and took the clutch from Danielle's hands. Rochelle's voice went from cold to ice. That is an illegal search. I am noting the time. I am noting your badge numbers, and this is being recorded. She pointed at Victor, who held his phone steady. The red light blinked. The deputy opened the clutch. He pulled out a phone, a lipstick, a credit card, and a folded piece of midnight blue silk. He held up the fabric between 2 fingers. What's this? A piece of my own dress, Danielle said. The bride tore it off me. Uh-huh. He turned the fabric over like it was evidence from a crime scene. He looked at Catherine. Catherine nodded, as if confirming something that didn't need confirming. Guests had gathered on the terrace above. A dozen phones were out, recording, watching, still not helping, but at least now, documenting. And then Carolyn appeared. She walked through the terrace doors with a fresh glass of champagne and the kind of smile that only exists on people who have never faced a single consequence in their entire lives. She floated down the stone steps toward the deputies like she was walking a runway. "Officers, thank you so much for coming. This woman disrupted my wedding. She was aggressive, hostile, and frankly, I don't feel safe with her on my property." Danielle said nothing. Carolyn stepped closer. She tilted her champagne glass, slowly, deliberately, and poured it over the front of Danielle's already torn dress. The golden liquid ran down the silk like tears. "That's ruining my day." The deputies watched. One of them pressed his lips together, not in shock, in amusement. He was trying not to laugh. Danielle felt the champagne soak through to her skin, cold, wet. She smelled the alcohol mixing with the gardenia-scented air. She looked down at her dress, torn, soaped, ruined. She looked at Carolyn. She looked at the deputies. She looked at the dozen phones recording from the terrace above. And then, for the first time all evening, she spoke with something other than calm. Not anger, something worse. Certainty. "You have no idea what you've just done." Carolyn rolled her eyes. "What? You gonna sue me with your food stamp lawyer?" Rochelle almost lunged. Victor put a hand on her shoulder, just enough. Danielle didn't respond. She was done talking to Carolyn Ashford. She was done talking to all of them. Danielle took out her phone. She made one call. She spoke quietly, too quietly for anyone to hear. 15 seconds. That's all it took. She hung up, put the phone back in her clutch, and waited. Rochelle was already on her own phone, walking in tight circles beside the SUV. "I need the full Trident file. Every document, every term sheet, every due diligence report. Yes, right now. All of it." 20 minutes passed. The deputies stood around looking important. Catherine paced. Carolyn went back inside to enjoy her party. The terrace crowd thinned out. And then, headlights. A black town car turned onto the gravel driveway. Slow, deliberate. The kind of car that doesn't honk, it just arrives. It pulled to a stop 10 feet from the deputies. The door opened. A man stepped out of the town car. Gray suit, French cuffs. Shoes polished so clean they reflected the flashing blue lights from the cruiser. He moved with the unhurried confidence of someone who had never once worried about being in the wrong place. His name was Graham Weston, senior partner at Pinnacle Equity Partners. White, 62 years old. Net worth somewhere north of $100 million. The kind of man that rooms rearrange themselves for. He didn't look at the deputies. He didn't look at Catherine. He walked straight to Danielle. "Ms. Harrison." His voice was low, respectful. The kind of respect that isn't performed, it's earned. "Are you all right? I came as soon as you called." Danielle nodded once. "I'm fine, Graham." "You don't look fine." He glanced at her torn dress, the champagne stain, the bare shoulder. His jaw tightened. Something shifted behind his eyes, the controlled anger of a man who knows how to aim it. He turned around. The deputies were staring. Catherine was staring. The few guests still on the terrace were staring. Everyone was staring at this white man in a $5,000 suit, treating this black woman like she was the most important person in Virginia. Graham reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card. He held it up between two fingers, the same way the deputy had held up Danielle's torn silk. "My name is Graham Weston. I am the senior partner at Pinnacle Equity Partners. The woman you've been detaining for the past 40 minutes is Danielle Harrison, our founder and CEO. He paused. Let it land. Her personal net worth exceeds $3 billion. She is the single largest private equity investor in the Mid-Atlantic region. And right now, you are standing between her and her vehicle after conducting an illegal search, ignoring her legal counsel, and failing to intervene when she was physically assaulted. Twice. The tall deputy opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Graham handed him the business card. Our legal team has been notified. I suggest you start thinking very carefully about your next words. The deputy looked at the card. He looked at his partner. His partner was already taking a step back, the universal body language of a man trying to distance himself from a disaster he helped create. Catherine Ashford Moore's face had turned the color of old paper. Her lips moved, but no sound came. For the first time all evening, she had nothing to say. And then, footsteps on gravel, fast ones. Elliot Ashford came rushing out of the estate. His tie was loose. His face was red. He had heard the commotion from inside. He had heard a name. He stopped 5 feet from Graham Weston. His eyes went wide. Wait, Graham! Graham Weston! From Pinnacle! Graham didn't smile. Hello, Elliot. Elliot's gaze shifted to Danielle. The torn dress, the champagne stain, the woman standing in a parking lot surrounded by deputies and security guards, and his own mother-in-law. His brain was doing the math. You could see it, the gears turning, the numbers collapsing, the future crumbling in real time behind his eyes. You're the investor? His voice cracked. You're Pinnacle? Danielle looked at him the way a teacher looks at a student who just failed the easiest test of his life. I'm the person who was going to write your company a $1.2 billion check on Monday morning. Was. That single word hit the parking lot like a bomb with no sound. Elliot turned to the estate. Carolyn was standing in the doorway, champagne glass still in hand. Her smile was gone. She had heard enough to know something was very wrong, but not enough to understand how wrong. Carolyn. Elliot's voice was shaking. Do you understand what you've done? What are you talking about? She's our investor. She's the only reason Trident has a future. She's the reason we're not bankrupt. Carolyn's champagne glass tilted. A few drops spilled onto the stone steps. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. How was I supposed to? She didn't look like... Like what, Carolyn? Elliot's voice broke wide open. Like what? She didn't answer. She didn't have one. Danielle straightened the remains of her dress. She looked at Elliot, not with anger, not with satisfaction, with something closer to exhaustion. The exhaustion of a woman who had spent her entire life being underestimated by people who never once bothered to ask who she was. Mr. Ashford, the investment is off the table. Pinnacle Equity does not do business with companies whose leadership tolerates this kind of behavior. She paused. Or marries into it. She turned to the deputies. Her voice was steady, final. I'll be filing a formal complaint. Unlawful detention, illegal search, failure to intervene during an assault. My attorney will be in contact with your department by morning. She looked at Carolyn one last time. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. Victor opened the SUV door. Danielle stepped in. Rochelle followed. The door closed with a soft, expensive click. The engine started. The headlights swept across the gravel, across the deputies, across Catherine's frozen face, across Elliot standing in the driveway with his hands at his sides. The SUV rolled down the oak-lined drive and disappeared into the Virginia night. Behind them, Carolyn's scream echoed across the manicured lawn. Elliot didn't move. He just stood there, watching his entire future drive away in a black SUV. The jazz band was still playing inside. Nobody was dancing. The wedding didn't end that night. It collapsed. Inside the ballroom, the guests who had watched from the terrace were already whispering. Not the polite, champagne-fueled gossip of a reception, the urgent, phone-in-hand kind. The kind where people text their lawyers before they text their spouses. Within 30 minutes, 3 different videos of the incident were circulating. One showed Carolyn tearing the dress. Another captured the champagne pour in full. The tilt of the glass, the golden liquid running down the silk, the deputies smirking in the background. The third, shot from the terrace at a high angle, showed Graham Weston arriving. His words inaudible, but his authority unmistakable. By the time dessert was served, half the guests had left. Cars lined up on the gravel driveway like a funeral procession in reverse. Nobody said goodbye to the bride. Carolyn found Elliot in the groom's suite. He was sitting on the edge of a chair, tie hanging loose, staring at his phone. He had called Danielle's office 4 times. Voicemail. He had called Graham Weston twice. The second time, Graham picked up. "Graham, please, can we talk about this? I had no idea who she was. I would never have let—" "Elliot." Graham's voice was flat. No warmth, no negotiation. "The deal is dead. Ms. Harrison has made her decision. I suggest you spend the rest of your evening figuring out how to explain a $1.2 billion hole to your board." The line went dead. Elliot put the phone down. He looked at Carolyn, who was standing in the doorway with mascara running down both cheeks. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "How was I supposed to know, Elliot? She didn't say who she was. She just walked in like she owned the place. She was about to own 30% of my company." Carolyn's mouth opened. No words came out. $1.2 billion, Carolyn. That's what your little performance just cost us. Billion. With a B. "You're blaming me? She showed up to my wedding uninvited." "I invited her!" Elliot's voice cracked off the walls. "I personally sent that invitation, through my assistant, 3 weeks ago, because I wanted the woman writing the biggest check in Trident's history to feel welcome." Silence. "And instead, you tore her dress. You poured champagne on her. You called the police on her. You humiliated her in front of 300 people, at our wedding, on the first day of our marriage." He laughed. Not the good kind, the kind that sounds like something breaking. "Congratulations, Carolyn. You made the most expensive first impression in the history of this family." Carolyn started crying. The ugly kind. Heaving, gasping, makeup destroying. She tried to reach for Elliot. He stepped back. "Don't." That was the last word he said to her that night. 40 miles away, the 2 deputies were having their own reckoning. The senior deputy, a 15-year veteran named Dale Corbin, got the call at 11:40 p.m. His shift supervisor's voice was tight. "Dale, there's a video going around. A wedding in Loudoun County. You and Patterson. Tell me it's not what it looks like." Dale said nothing. "Report to Internal Affairs. First thing tomorrow, both of you. And Dale, don't talk to anyone. Not the press. Not your union rep. Nobody. Not until I figure out how bad this is." By midnight, both deputies were placed on administrative leave. The county sheriff, a man who had survived 3 elections and 2 scandals, released a 4-sentence statement to the press. "We are aware of an incident involving 2 of our deputies at a private event in Loudoun County. The matter is under internal review. We take all complaints seriously. We will have no further comment at this time." It was the kind of statement designed to say nothing, but the videos said everything. The next morning, Sunday, Carolyn woke up in the bridal suite alone. Elliot had slept in a guest room. She reached for her phone and saw 43 missed notifications. She opened Instagram. Her last post, a smiling photo from the ceremony captioned, "Forever begins today," had 2,000 new comments. She scrolled through the first 10. "Disgusting. You're garbage. Imagine being this racist at your own wedding. That poor woman. I hope she sues you into the ground. Your husband should leave you. Delete your account." Carolyn's hands shook. She scrolled faster. It got worse. She called her mother. Catherine didn't pick up. She called a PR consultant, a woman named Diane who charged $800 an hour. Diane listened to the full story and said, "Delete every social media account you have. Do it now. We'll talk strategy on Monday." Carolyn deleted everything by noon. But the internet doesn't forget. It was already too late. Monday morning came, but the check didn't. Elliot Ashford sat in his office at Trident Infrastructure Group. Glass desk, skyline view, a framed photo of the groundbreaking ceremony for his biggest project, a $400 million mixed-use development in Arlington. The photo showed him smiling, holding a golden shovel, surrounded by investors and politicians. That photo was taken 6 months ago, back when the future still had a floor under it. His phone rang. It was his business partner, Neil Crawford. "Elliot, tell me this isn't real. Tell me the Pinnacle deal is still alive." It's not alive, Neil. Silence. Then, do you understand what that means? We have 3 active projects. Combined obligation north of $800 million. Without Pinnacle's capital injection, we default on the Arlington project alone by end of quarter. The banks will pull our credit lines. Subcontractors will file liens. We're done. I know. You know? That's all you've got? Your wife poured champagne on our investor and you know? Elliot hung up. He didn't have an answer. He didn't have anything. By Tuesday, the story found its legs. Terrence Walsh was an investigative journalist for the National Tribune, the kind of reporter who didn't chase ambulances. His article dropped Wednesday morning, front page of the digital edition. The headline read, "Bride assaults black CEO at wedding, unaware she was her husband's billion-dollar investor." The piece was devastating, not because it was sensational, because it was thorough. Walsh had obtained the cell phone footage from multiple angles. He had interviewed 9 guests, all off the record, all confirming the same sequence of events. He had also dug into the deputies. Dale Corbin had 3 prior complaints of racial profiling in his file. Cable news picked it up. Morning shows ran the footage. Legal analysts debated the case on split screens. Social media turned it into a movement. The hashtag Danielle deserved better trended for 3 consecutive days. Another one followed. Who you think she is? People sharing their own stories of being underestimated, profiled, dismissed because of how they looked. Danielle gave one interview. Just one. She sat across from a journalist in a quiet studio. No audience, no applause, no performance. She wore a simple black dress. Her voice was steady. I've underestimated my entire career. By bankers who assumed I was the assistant. By CEOs who looked past me in meetings. By security guards who asked me for ID in my own building. What happened at that wedding was not new. It was just finally on camera. That clip was viewed 14 million times in 48 hours. The legal machinery moved fast. Danielle's legal team, led by Rochelle Grant, filed 2 lawsuits on Friday. The first was a civil suit against Carolyn Ashford for assault and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The evidence package included 4 video recordings, 22 witness statements, the preserved torn dress, and a toxicology report on the champagne stain, confirming it matched the brand served at the reception. The second lawsuit targeted Loudoun County for the deputy's conduct, unlawful detention, illegal search. Within 3 weeks, the county agreed to a $2.5 million settlement. Both deputies, Corbin and Patterson, were formally terminated. The consent decree required the entire sheriff's department to undergo implicit bias training, body camera protocol reform, and quarterly review by an independent oversight board. Carolyn's case went to trial. Judge Elaine Crawford presided, a no-nonsense federal judge with a reputation for keeping courtrooms tight and attorneys honest. The trial lasted 4 days. Carolyn's defense attorney, a high-priced litigator from Richmond, argued that his client's actions were the result of heightened emotions on her wedding day and a misunderstanding of the guest's identity. Judge Crawford was unmoved. The evidence was overwhelming. The videos played on a 60-inch screen in the courtroom. The torn dress was entered as Exhibit A, still stained, still ripped, sealed in a clear evidence bag. Witnesses testified one after another. The story never changed. Carolyn took the stand on day 3. She cried. She apologized. She said she wasn't racist. She was just protective of her special day. The prosecutor asked one question that ended her testimony. Ms. Ashford, if the woman who walked into your reception had been white and wearing the same dress, would you have torn it off her shoulder? Carolyn hesitated. 3 seconds. 4. 5. It's not about... No further questions. The verdict came on day 4. Carolyn Ashford was found liable for assault and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Judge Crawford ordered her to pay $1.8 million in damages. Her statement from the bench was brief and precise. Wealth and social standing do not grant anyone the right to degrade another human being. The defendant's actions were not a misunderstanding. They were a choice, and choices have consequences. The gavel came down. Carolyn didn't move. Her attorney put a hand on her shoulder. She shrugged it off. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. Carolyn's car was waiting, but the walk from the courthouse steps to the vehicle was the longest 30 feet of her life. Meanwhile, Trident Infrastructure Group was drowning. Without Pinnacle's capital, the Arlington project stalled. Subcontractors filed liens totaling $96 million. Banks froze Trident's credit lines. By the end of the month, Elliott Ashford was forced to sell the company at a fraction of its value. Pennies on the dollar for a firm that had been valued at over $500 million just weeks earlier. His professional reputation didn't survive the sale. Neither did his marriage. Divorce papers were filed within 3 months of the wedding. The reception that was supposed to launch their life together became the thing that ended it. 6 months later, Danielle Harrison sat in her penthouse. Same kitchen, same espresso, same view of the inner harbor. The morning light hit the water and scattered into 1,000 tiny diamonds. Her phone buzzed. Rochelle. Have you seen the journal this morning? Not yet. Check your email, cover story. Danielle opened her laptop. There it was, the front page of a major business magazine. Her photo. Not a glamour shot, not a power pose. Just her, sitting at a desk looking straight into the camera with the same steady gaze she had given Carolyn Ashford in that parking lot. The headline read, "The Woman Who Walked Away and Changed Everything." She stared at it for a long time. Then she closed the laptop, picked up her espresso, and looked out the window. The $1.2 billion that was supposed to go to Trident Infrastructure had found a new home. Danielle redirected the entire investment to a Black-owned infrastructure firm called Cornerstone Development, led by a 34-year-old engineer named Isaiah Booker from her own neighborhood in West Baltimore. A kid who grew up 6 blocks from the apartment building where her mother used to scrub floors. The deal made national business news. Isaiah's face showed up on every network. His company went from 12 employees to 300 in 4 months. They broke ground on their first major project, affordable housing in East Baltimore, on a Tuesday morning in October. Danielle was there. No cameras, no speeches. She just stood in the back and watched Isaiah hold the golden shovel. She smiled. A real one. 2 weeks after the investment closed, Danielle launched the Grace Harrison Foundation, named after her mother. The foundation provided free legal defense for victims of racial discrimination, pro bono attorneys, case funding, courtroom support. In its first 6 months, the foundation took on 41 cases across 12 states. Grace Harrison, 71 years old, retired, still living in the same Baltimore row house where she raised Danielle, called her daughter the day the foundation was announced. "Baby, you didn't have to name it after me. Mama, everything I am is named after you." As for the others, the story wrote its own endings. Carolyn Ashford paid the $1.8 million judgment. It nearly emptied what was left of her trust fund after the divorce settlement. She was dropped from every social circle that once defined her identity. The charity boards, the country clubs, the luncheons. Gone. She completed 200 hours of court-ordered community service at a food bank in Fairfax County. There were rumors she tried to rebrand herself. A podcast, a blog, something about personal growth. It never gained traction. The internet has a long memory, and it wasn't ready to forgive. Elliott Ashford lost Trident, lost his marriage, lost his reputation. But unlike Carolyn, he didn't hide. He issued a public apology to Danielle, not through a PR firm, not through a lawyer. A handwritten letter released to the press with her permission. In it, he wrote that his failure wasn't just that he didn't protect her, it was that he didn't challenge the environment that made the attack possible in the first place. He took a consulting position at a smaller firm and became an advocate for diversity in corporate leadership. It didn't erase what happened, but it was a start. Deputies Corbin and Patterson were terminated. Corbin faced a separate civil lawsuit from a prior incident. a traffic stop 2 years earlier that had been buried in departmental files. The Walsh article brought it back to light. Patterson left Virginia entirely. Neither man wore a badge again. Catherine Ashford Moore went quiet. Her social circle thinned to almost nothing. She was not seen at any public events for the remainder of the year. One evening, months after the trial, months after the headlines faded, Danielle sat by her window. Baltimore glittered below. She picked up her phone and called her mother. "Mama? Hey, baby. We did it." Grace Harrison was quiet for a moment. Then, softly, "We always were going to." So let me ask you something. If you were there that night, standing in that ballroom, champagne in hand, watching a woman get her dress torn off her shoulder, would you have said something? Or would you have looked at your shoes like everybody else? Drop your answer in the comments. I want to hear it. And if this story made you feel something, if it made you angry or proud, or if it made you think about a time when you should have spoken up but didn't, hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe if you want more stories like this. Stories about people who got underestimated by everyone in the room and still walked out standing taller than all of them. Because here's the truth. Justice doesn't always come from a courtroom. Sometimes it comes from a woman in a torn dress who knows exactly who she is and doesn't need anyone's permission to prove it.
Caroline stood there, smiling, thinking she would win something. She had no idea she just lost everything. You know what scares me most about this story? It's not what Caroline did. It's why she felt safe doing it. She looked around that room. 300 people championed crystal glasses, and she knew nobody would stop her. And that's the thing. Danielle happened to be a billionaire. She had lawyers, cameras, power. But what if she wasn't? What if she was just a woman in a beautiful dress who saved up for months to buy it? Same torn sleeve, same champion on her skin, but no headlines, no charges. Just a woman walking to her car alone with nobody believing her story. Dignity shouldn't need $1 billion to be protected. 300 people watched it happen, and nobody said a word. So tell me, when you see someone being torn down for who they are you the person who speaks or the person who looks away? If this story hit you, like, share, and subscribe. Drop your answer in the comments and come back next week, because the next story is going to shake you even harder. Your worth was never decided by the people who underestimated you. It never will be.